Hello and welcome! In this video, we're going to continue looking at the Adeptus Mechanicus rules for the 10th edition. Remember, as always, this is just a first look, so I might make some mistakes and I'd like to apologize beforehand, but anyway, if you haven't seen the first part, maybe check that out. I'll leave a link in the description down below, and with that being said, let's continue on where we left off. So the next unit we're going to look at is one that I really like, and I think in 10th edition it's going to be even more exciting, that being the Onager Dunecrawler. Now the Onager Dunecrawler is coming in at 140 points, and while that seems a little bit high for what it used to offer, and maybe where it even is now, I think there's some things to consider as we're going to take a look at this model in specific in the 10th edition rule set. Now let's take a look at what this model has to offer for those 140 points. It has an 8-inch movement speed with a 2+ save and a 4+ invulnerable save. Now 4+ invulnerable save and a 2+ base save, in addition to the benefits of the Doctrine and Imperatives, which it does gain, can really make this an incredibly durable unit. And in addition to that, it has a toughness profile of 10 and a wounds characteristic of 11. Not only that, it only decays down to its lowest bracket at 1 to 4 wounds, so it has quite a lot of space before it gets to that point. That's actually very interesting, and I think it's going to be a very durable unit that's going to be very fun to play, with a rather large base size, and something that can really be resilient and powerful for your army, as I don't think there are that many 4+ invulnerable saves within the current system, especially at the toughness that it comes in at. But what's more interesting is, because there's no more war gear, you automatically get a lot of things for free. You get something like the broad spectrum data tether or the smoke launcher for free, and in addition to that, you get one Cognus heavy stubber, which gives you 3 shots at a 36-inch range, with a strength of 4 and a damage profile of 1, at a rapid fire 3 profile, and a sustained hits 1. That's not particularly impressive, but it's not bad either as an additional throw-in, just to have for free with the purchase of the Dunecrawler. Now where the Dunecrawler gets really interesting is, let's take a look at the primary weapon systems that it comes armed with. The first one is the Icarus array, which does come with the Daedalus missile launcher. The Daedalus missile launcher is a 48-inch range with 1 attack, a 4+ ballistic skill, 10 strength, 2 armor penetration, and a damage profile of D6+1. And it has an anti-flyer profile of 2+. Compare that to the Ballistari Twin Cognus last cannon, and you see really quickly that you're losing essentially 2 strength and 1 point of armor penetration, but otherwise is pretty much the same, except for the twin length profile, which I don't think is particularly necessary for a weapon such as this, but it can come in handy. Now the Icarus array on the other hand has a anti-flyer profile of 4+, it is twin length, and it has a 48-inch range with 6 shots, a 4+ ballistic skill, 8 strength, 1 armor penetration, and 2 damage. Compare that to a Twin Cognus autocan, which has 9 strength, 1 armor penetration, and 3 damage. All you're really losing is 1 strength and 1 point of damage. That is a decent enough big deal, but consider the following: you're essentially paying 140 points and getting an approximate equivalent of 3 Ballistari armed with Twin Cognus autocans, which would cost you 150 points right off the bat. And then on top of that, you're essentially getting a last cam profile, which would be another 50 points, and you also gain that additional Cognus heavy stubber. Now that might be more of a testament to the nerfing that the Ballistari received, more than the buffs that the Dunecrawler received. However, the durability profile of the Dunecrawler is also very impressive. That combined, I think right there makes me want to play as many Dunecrawlers as I can within a list, and most likely I'm going to end up running 1 to 2 of these in most of the lists that I build. However, the Dunecrawler does have some other options, so let's take a look at those as well. You can take the Neutron Laser, which has been a popular choice in the past. This has a blast profile and a heavy profile as well, which is a benefit and not a detriment within 10th edition rules. This weapon now has a consistent 2 shots at a whopping strength of 16 and 4 armor penetration, but does have that annoying D6+1 damage, which does make it a little bit inconsistent at times, and I kinda miss the old D3+3 or even D6+3 damage profiles that we saw within 9th edition. That being said, I think there are still situations where we'll take the Neutron Laser, but I do think the Icarus array is a little bit better than the Neutron Laser at this time. Oh, and don't forget, you do gain an additional Cognus heavy stubber with that Neutron Laser, as you would within 9th edition. Now the Eradication Beamer has also gotten a bit of a change, however it has a very inconsistent attack profile of D6, and has pretty much the same profile in both modes, having 9 strength and 2 armor penetration and 2 damage in its long range profile, gaining 1 additional armor penetration and 1 additional damage in its short range profile. It also has the sustained hits of D3, which can be beneficial, and the blast profile, which can make it a little bit more of an anti-swarm weapon, especially if you can get a high roll on some of those shots, whether it's the number of attacks or the sustained hits, and you get a little bit lucky. That being said, I still don't think the Eradication Beamer is really what you want it to be. And one thing I think they kind of missed out on is that if they had made it a little more like the Necron weapons of a similar type that have a dispersed and focused profile, they could have made it so that the focused profile was a bit more of a long-range, heavy-hitting profile, and the dispersed was basically a short-range flamer that was really effective against swarm units. Now, with that in mind, that would have given it a bit of a unique role and would have made it unique to the other weapons, but as it stands now, it's not particularly more interesting than some of the other options. However, I definitely think the 10th edition version of the Eradication Beamer is the most interesting version we've seen so far. There is one other weapon that the Dunecrawler has access to, which is the Twin Onager Heavy Phosphor Blaster, which ignores cover, is twin-linked, and gives you 4 shots at a strength of 6, 1 armor penetration, and 2 damage. I don't really see where you'll be taking this unless you're really in need of that ignores cover ability, which I don't think really makes up for the lackluster profile. For some reason, the Onager Dunecrawler also has a Heavy Phosphor Blaster profile, which I don't really know where that comes into play, as I don't think that's a weapon it can actually take, and the Heavy Phosphor Blaster is either an error on this datasheet, or it's something they intend you to take with that Twin Onager Heavy Phosphor Blaster, and made some error on the weapon options that they offered on the second page. In either case, let me know if I'm missing something, because maybe I've just overlooked something on my end, and that Heavy Phosphor Blaster plays some role, as that would actually make the Twin Onager Heavy Phosphor Blaster a little more interesting, though even in that case, I still think you would take the Icarus Array, as you get the same number of shots at a much stronger profile. In either case, let's move on to the next unit. The next unit we're going to take a look at is going to be the Taraxi Skystalkers, which have been pretty much a weak unit within the game since their release, and they had one interesting ability being the Arc Grenades, which was taken away in 9th edition, and I don't think they've gained anything particularly interesting within the 10th edition rule set. The Taraxi Skystalkers come into 2 different unit sizes, being a unit of 5 and a unit of 10, pretty much mimicking their kit size. Each model will cost you a total of 14 points, and that seems a little bit high for what they offer. Their movement speed is an impressive 12 inches, and they do have a decent toughness of 4, though their save is only a 4+ normal save and a 5+ invulnerable save with 2 wounds, which isn't the worst thing in the world, but it's not that particularly great. They also have the Deep Strike ability and have Doctrina Imperatives. Where they kind of begin to fall apart is their range weapons, which are just Flechette Blasters and Flechette Carbines, both of which put out a decent number of shots, but their profile is only 3 strength, 0 armor penetration, and 1 damage, which makes them rather lackluster. In addition to that, their melee attacks aren't particularly anything special either, mimicking their weapons, but at a much lower output. Their special ability, Ride the Thermals, is something new, and that says, in your shooting phase after this unit has shot, if it is not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units, it can do one of the following: make a normal move of up to 6 inches, make a normal move of up to 12 inches, provided every model in this unit ended that move wholly within 6 inches of 1 or more friendly Adeptus Mechanicus battle line units. In either case, if it does until the end of the turn, this unit is not eligible to declare a charge. And that ability seems pretty weak on what you're getting in terms of the rest of the profile, as that ability would actually be really impressive on certain other models with maybe heavier weapons that had a bit of a shorter range. However, considering how weak the weapons are on these models, I really don't think they're that good, though maybe you could do some tricks where you can basically move them up forward, take some shots at an enemy unit, and then move them on to an objective or move them back somewhere into safety. But even then, do I really want that, or would I rather just take a unit with a bit of a longer range profile, park it on an objective, and then shoot from that range, as opposed to doing all this work to essentially get extra movement on a unit that's kind of weak to begin with? That probably costs a little bit too many points. I really wish they were given some kind of interesting ability that plays into the Ride the Thermals ability in itself. In either case, I think the Taraxi Skystalkers are still going to be sitting on the sideline, as they were within 9th edition, and pretty much most of 8th edition, as they just don't offer enough compared to other choices within the army, which is a bit sad because they do look pretty cool. And now I should take a little break to mention the sponsor of this video, that being VentureTradeCo.com, which sells different Warhammer 40k kits as well as Age of Sigmar kits at a 15% discount, as well as carrying some kits that might be a little bit harder to find, like some of the boarding patrol boxes that are still available on that site, as well as some of the kill team boxes, such as Gallifall. They also carry a wide array of different collectibles, as well as things like comic books and hobby supplies. So do check them out if you're in the United States, and if you buy something from them, you do help the channel out, so it's win-win for both of us, as you get something you want at a bit of a discount, and you help support the channel at the same time, meaning that we both win in this transaction, so it's definitely mutually beneficial. Anyway, with that being said, let's return to our regularly scheduled content, and continue looking at the different Adeptus Mechanicus units. Now moving on, we come to the much more interesting Taraxi, being the Taraxi Sterilizers. They have a very similar profile with that 12-inch movement speed, a toughness of 4, a 4+ normal save, and a 5+ invulnerable save. However, what makes them different is that, unlike the Tyraxi Skystalkers, they are armed with a Phosphor Torch, which has the Flamer Torrent ability and ignores cover. It also has D6 shots with a strength profile of 4 and a damage characteristic of 1. It still doesn't have any armor penetration, which is a major downside, and I think they've definitely gone weaker in 10th edition, as even their Tyraxi talents have been nerfed, and it seems like they pretty much have been reduced to much more of a supportive role than they were within the previous edition. That being said, they're also 14 points a model, so maybe you can include them as basically a heavy output unit, and you can make some use of them in that. They also have a very interesting ability beyond their Deep Strike and Doctrina imperatives. This ability is called Sicarian Conflagration, which says in your shooting phase, after this unit has shot, select one enemy unit excluding monsters and vehicles that was hit by one or more of this unit's Phosphor Torches this phase and roll 1d6, adding 3 to the result if this unit is within 6 inches of a friendly Adeptus Mechanicus battle line unit. On a roll of 4+, until the end of your opponent's next turn, that enemy unit is aflame, and while a unit is aflame, subtract 2 inches from its movement characteristic and subtract 2 from its advance and charge rolls made for that unit. Now this is an incredibly powerful ability if it's used correctly, because not only are you shaving off 2 inches on their movement speed, but you're also making it much harder for that enemy unit to advance and charge, meaning that you can pretty much use this unit of Tyraxi Sterilizers to essentially screen against certain charge units, making it very difficult for your opponent to make their charges successfully due to the impairment to both their movement speed and their charge roll. And not only that, but if they happen to be within range of that Adeptus Mechanicus battle line unit, they pretty much have a very easy time of making a successful roll check for this ability, considering they're adding so much to the result thanks to being within range. So all in all, I'll say the Tyraxi Sterilizers have definitely changed in terms of usage within the 10th edition rules in comparison to their output abilities within 9th edition. However, that being said, as a utility unit, I think the Tyraxi Sterilizers are very interesting and can still do quite a decent amount of damage, considering that they're only 14 points a model. So all in all, with a unit of 10 of them, you're going to be scoring about 35 hits, which is pretty impressive. And even though the Skystalkers might be putting out, on average, more shots, the Sterilizers are definitely going to be doing a little bit more work overall due to their different abilities, and that Sicarian Conflagration is going to be a very powerful ability that, if used correctly, can really swing a game, because it can be a very annoying ability for your opponents to overcome, especially if they're playing a melee army that's trying to essentially reach one of your units with one of their critical units, and you can essentially prevent their charge, thus shooting that unit off the table the next turn. In any case, I definitely think the Sterilizers are a pretty good unit. I just think they have a bit of a different battle role than they did within 9th edition. Now moving on from the Sterilizers, we come to another new unit introduced in Engine War, being the Cerberus Raiders. The Cerberus Raiders still have the option of being taken in units of 3 or 6, coming in at 25 points a model, which is rather expensive for what you're getting. That being said, let's see if they still stand up to the test of time, or if they've kind of fallen off in terms of power. They do have a 12-inch movement speed, a toughness of 4, a 4+ normal save, and a 5+ invulnerable save, with 2 wounds, which makes them very similar to those Sterilizers. Now that being said, what do they have in terms of weapons and abilities? Well, their weapons are the standard Galvanic Carbine, which gives you 3 attacks per Cerberus Raider, with a strength profile of 4, a damage characteristic of 1, and no armor penetration. And the Alpha carries an Archaeotech pistol, which has a range of 12, 1 attack, 6 strength, 1 armor penetration, and 1 damage, and all their weapons have devastating wounds, which can come into play in certain situations, though I do think with the limited number of shots you're getting, at the points cost you're getting, it's going to be a little less effective than certain other options in terms of that devastating wound ability. Now they also have their normal melee profile, which isn't bad either, considering each Cerberus Raider gets 4 attacks, has a strength profile of 4, and 1 damage per attack, but no armor penetration. I think the lack of armor penetration is definitely going to come into play, though do remember they do benefit from Doctrina imperatives, so they can make up some of that armor penetration through that ability. They also have a very nice ability in their core abilities, being that they have a scout movement of 9 inches, which can give them a lot of mobility early game. They also come with an enhanced data tether, considering there's no more war gear, so you always take it if you have the opportunity to. They do have one other ability, which is known as Tactica Obliqua. Tactica Obliqua says, once per turn, when an enemy unit ends a normal, advance, or fallback move within 9 inches of this unit, if this unit is not within engagement range of 1 or more enemy units, it can do one of the following: make a normal move of up to d6 inches, or make a move of up to 6 inches if it's within 6 inches of a friendly Adeptus Mechanicus battle line unit, which is all fine and good, but it's definitely a big nerf to what it used to be, where you can essentially put them in front of a different unit, and when your opponent declares a charge against your Cerberus Raiders, you activate that stratagem and move them back. Now that would be way too powerful as an ability to have baseline, so I do understand why they reduced it, because it would just be way too good, and you basically max out on Cerberus Raiders and screen your entire army every single game, making it impossible for your opponents to charge you. So it looks like that function has been given to the Sterilizers more than the Raiders within 10th edition. That being said, it doesn't seem like they have the sniper capabilities that they did within 9th edition either, which does reduce some of their uniqueness, at least in terms of their base profile. Not only that, but at 25 points a model, they are kind of expensive, and I don't think they really bring all that much to the table. However, the mobility that they bring is nice to have, but I do think once again the Taraxi can kind of fulfill that role without too much effort and can be rather effective in that situation as well. That being said, maybe there's some room for these guys as well, because they can generate some additional mortal wounds and can be a little bit annoying because of that Tactica Obliqua ability, where they can kind of play keep away from enemy units, even if they can't necessarily screen your friendly units. That being said, I don't really know if I would want to include them at this moment, unless maybe I'm overlooking something, which is very possible in a first look video. So far, if I had to choose a fast attack choice, it would be those Sterilizers and the Ballistari more than anything, but let's see if that can change in following unit options. Up next is the alternative Cerberus unit build, which is the Cerberus Sulphur Hounds. The Sulphur Hounds have a similar profile characteristic with a 12-inch movement, a toughness of 4, 2 wounds, a 4+ normal save, and a 5+ invulnerable save. They are a little bit cheaper than their Cerberus Raider counterparts, coming in at only 65 points for 3 models, or 130 points for 6 models. This means they're a little more than 21 points per model, so let's see what you get for those 21 points. You do get the Doctrina Imperatives as you do on the Cerberus Raiders. You also get a little bit of a different weapons profile, in that each model has twin phosphor pistols, sulfur breath, and clawed limbs. In addition to that, for every 3 models in this unit, one Sulphur Hound's twin phosphor pistol can be replaced with a phosphor blast carbine and one phosphor pistol. So let's see what those weapons do within the 10th edition rules. And don't forget that the Alpha does have the phosphor blast pistol, the sulfur breath, and the cavalry arc maul, as well as the clawed limbs, making him a little bit more contentious within melee. So the phosphor blast carbine used to be a little bit of a hard take, and I still don't know if I would take it in exchange for those pistols, though you do get that phosphor pistol in exchange for the twin pistol, which is fine enough in itself. The phosphor blast carbine has the blast profile, ignores cover, has an 18-inch range, and D6 attacks. It has a strength profile of 6 and 1 damage with no armor penetration characteristic, though don't forget the Doctrinas. The phosphor blast pistol is a 12-inch range with D3 shots, a strength of 4, and 1 damage. It does have the pistol profile, which is good to keep in mind. The regular phosphor pistol has ignores cover, the pistol profile, a 12-inch range, 1 shot at a strength of 4, and 1 damage with no armor penetration at a ballistic skill of 4. So far, it seems pretty consistent, and the only thing that really changes is the number of shots you're getting as a result of the weapon you have. The twin phosphor pistol has ignores cover, has the pistol profile, does have the twin link profile, which is nice considering that the strength profile isn't particularly high, has 2 shots total at a 12-inch range with that 4 strength and 1 damage, so once again very consistent to the other pistols. The sulfur breath though is a little bit different in that it ignores cover, is a pistol, has the torrent profile, which is still a flamer weapon, but it only has a 9-inch range, which is shorter than I think it was within 9th edition, although I might be misremembering that a little bit. And it has D6 shots at 3 strength, 1 armor penetration, which is nice to see, even though the strength profile is a little bit lower than I would like, with 1 damage. That's not bad, and I think the number of shots you're getting on these units, considering that each model is a little less than 22 points, I do think there might be some justification for the number of shots that you can put out with this unit. Now that being said, I do still think that there might be some more justification for one of the Taraxi units, but this does give me a little bit more interest than say the Cerberus Raiders do within the 10th edition rule set. Now let's look at the last special ability that this unit has, that being the Line Breaker's special ability, which says each time this unit ends a charge move, select one enemy unit within engagement range of it and roll 1d6 for each model in this unit, adding 2 to the result if this unit started its charge move within 6 inches of one or more friendly Adeptus Mechanicus battle line unit. So keep in mind that you start the charge within 6 inches, you don't have to end it within 6 inches, which is a very important distinction, and for each 4+, that enemy unit suffers 1 mortal wound. And this is actually pretty interesting considering that this unit has those pistol profiles, and it actually has a decent amount of output, as well as a decent amount of mobility, so it can really get into a position where it can actually use this, and considering that you add that additional 2 points if you start your charge within basically a unit of Sicarian Rangers or Sicarian Vanguard, you can really do some decent damage to an enemy unit, and you can probably get some leverage out of this unit if you wish so, due to kind of the lowish points cost, though I still think they're kind of expensive for what they're doing, and I really do hope Games Workshop gives something to both the Cerberus Raiders and Cerberus Silverhounds, as both are very interesting and nice looking models, but as it stands right now, I'm kind of having a hard time of figuring out where they fit within an army in comparison to some of the other choices. That being said, there might be some places that I'm overlooking, and there might be some opportunities for playing these guys within an army, as they don't seem that bad at first glance for the Sulphurhounds in particular, so maybe we'll see them show up on the tabletops more than I expect, but right now I don't think we're going to see that many of them considering the higher points cost of other models within the army, especially with how good something like the Dunecrawler is, the Cataphront Breachers, and even the Ballistari at this point. So you're probably going to see these cowboys taking a little bit of a backseat within the 10th edition, at least until things change, or until some of their special abilities become a little more relevant within the game. Now moving along, we come to the Servitors, the regular Servitors, not Battle Servitors or the Cataphrons or whatever, but just the regular Servitors. These guys have always been a little bit of a weird choice within the Adeptus Mechanicus army, as they usually have been a little too expensive, but sometimes they did see a decent amount of play, simply because they were low enough in points to be interesting and they could put out enough firepower to be an interesting choice within an Adeptus Mechanicus army. That being said, let's see if that carries over to the 10th edition rules. The first thing I'll say, they still come in a unit of 4 and have no variation to their unit size. However, they are only 50 points, so depending on what kind of war gear options they have, that might be actually rather good, because at 50 points, that makes them one of the lowest cost choices within the army, and if they can carry as many special weapons as they could with the 9th or 8th edition, that can make them actually rather powerful considering what kind of output you get on a unit such as this. So what does their profile look like? Well, their movement speed is 6 inches, they have a low toughness of 3, a 4+ normal save, a 6+ invulnerable save, and 1 wound. That does make them a little bit fragile, but they've always been a little bit of a fragile choice. They do benefit from Doctrina Imperatives, which can increase both their offensive and defensive capabilities depending on which Doctrina you're using. They do have the Mind Lock ability, which has been changed and does require more of a commitment than it did in the past. This ability says that while a Tech Priest model is leading this unit, improve the ballistic skill and weapon skill characteristics of ranged and melee weapons equipped by Servitor models in this unit by 1. Now the key distinction here is that the Tech Priest is no longer just within 6 inches of this unit, but rather has to be leading it. So you do have to make some level of sacrifice by choosing one of your Tech Priests to lead this unit, as opposed to a different unit, and when leading a unit, you do gain different benefits and buffs, so I do think that's going to be an important distinction from the incarnation of this ability in 9th edition. That being said, it might be still a decent enough ability. So let's take a look at the weapons that the Servitors have. The Servitors still come baseline with their Servitor's Server Arm, which is just a generic melee weapon. And here's the interesting thing is that up to 2 models can each have their Servitor Server Arm replaced with one of the following: a Heavy Bolter, a Multi-Melta, or a Plasma Cannon. So it does look like they can still get 2 of the special weapons, but I'm guessing there are some caveats. One other thing I should mention before we look at the weapons is they also have the Servitor Retinue ability, which is a new ability. This says at the start of the Declare Battle Formation step, this unit can join one other unit from your army that is being led by a Tech Priest Engine Seer model. A unit cannot have more than 1 Servitor unit joined. If it does, until the end of the battle, every model in this unit counts as being part of the Bodyguard unit, and that Bodyguard unit's starting strength is increased accordingly. Now this is interesting because it does bypass some of the downsides of that Mind Lock ability, so it does make up for it in some ways. However, that being said, it only works with the Engine Seer. The one thing I'll say is that when I was reading the Mind Lock ability, the first thing that came to mind was that I would most likely group these with an Engine Seer, as that gives you the least detriment in terms of who you're grouping with, considering the Engine Seer is not that impressive within the 10th edition rules. Now that being said, you do have to take an Engine Seer in that case, which is a little bit of a bummer, and I would have really liked to have been able to take them with some of the other Tech Priests that you have available to you, especially when you can group them with a unit of Cataphrons, as it would have made a bit more of an interesting unit type, considering that you would expect regular Servitors to sometimes be with Cataphrons in terms of a thematic type of thing. So what do their weapons look like? Well, the Heavy Bolter is a Heavy Bolter with a strength of 5, 1 armor penetration, and 2 damage, and 3 attacks total. It has the heavy profile and sustained hits 1, which is new. It still has a 36-inch range, but the Servitor version has a 6+ ballistic skill, which means even with that Mind Lock ability, you're only going to a 5+ ballistic skill, which is incredibly rough to have, and does make it a lot less interesting than one would have thought, which does seem to be the case with all the other weapons, and if you're grouping it with a Tech Priest, you're only getting a 5+ ballistic skill, which is a bit rough even with the increased output at the lower points cost, and if you're running these without a Tech Priest to accompany them, that's going to be a really difficult sell, and it's going to be a little bit of a hard inclusion within an army even at 50 points, as I'd rather have something like a Ballistari or some of my other options. Now, the Plasma Cannon is pretty much where it used to be in 9th edition, outside that ballistic skill of 6. The Multi-Melta though has seen some changes, now having the heavy keyword. the Melta keyword of 2, but the range is only 18 inches, which hurts it even further, though it does have a strength of 9, 4 armor penetration, and d6 damage. All in all being said, even though I was really excited when I first saw the points cost and some of the abilities of the servitors to begin with, I do think they're a little bit too weak, and I still think you're probably not going to see them that often, considering that 5+ ballistic skill with the Mind Lock ability is going to be really rough on those weapons, even if you can include them within your army. So in most cases, I think you're probably going to go with other choices, though maybe there's some situations where you do choose a servitor over some of your other options, but who knows, maybe there are going to be some ways of improving their abilities and make them a little more consistent, in which case they're actually rather good considering you're getting 2 of those heavy weapons for only a total of 50 points, and you get a total of 4 bodies, which can be rather nice, and you can group them within engines here without losing too much, so maybe there's some distinction there, and maybe you can find some use for them in those situations. But again, like I said, I think they're still going to be a little bit underwhelming for what you're getting. Now the next unit we're going to look at is the Sicarian Infiltrators. The Sicarian Infiltrators were a rather good unit within 9th edition, and they started out really strong, but then they kind of fell off towards the end of 9, being replaced by the Rust Stalkers, so let's see how they do within 10th edition. They come in 2 unit types, as most of the units do, being 80 points for 5 models, or 160 points for 10 models, meaning that they cost 16 points per model, and have a movement characteristic of 8 inches, a toughness profile of 4, a 4+ normal save, a 5+ invulnerable save, and 2 wounds model. That seems pretty standard, and they do still have the Infiltrator's ability. They do gain stealth, and they have the Doctrina Imperatives, which are all pretty nice, making them a little bit more durable and a little bit more offensive when you need them. All in all, I do think the Sicarians do look pretty good, especially at only 16 points each. But that all does come down to the weapons that they come equipped with and their special abilities, which we haven't looked at yet, but they do seem pretty consistent with their 9th edition profile, having the option to take a Flechette Blaster with its pretty standard profile of 12 inches, 5 attacks, 3 strength, and 1 damage, coming alongside a Taser Goad, which has sustained hits too, which is the old profile that had in 9th edition, where on a critical hit, which is an unmodified 6 to hit, they score 2 additional hits, which is what they had before, and they have a strength of 6 with 1 damage and 2 attacks per model. They do have a 4+ weapon skill and ballistic skill, which does make it a little bit less consistent. The Stub Carbine is still the same, basically having that bolter profile, though it is in pistol form, with 3 attacks, a strength of 4, and 1 damage at 12 inches of range. They also have the power weapon, which gives them 4 strength, 2 armor penetration, 1 damage, and 2 attacks at the weapon skill of 4. Nothing too special, and I think they're still pretty good, and I'll probably run them in some situations. There is one special ability I haven't mentioned yet, which is their Neurostatic Interference Aura, which says while an enemy unit is within 6 inches of this unit, each time a battle shock or leadership test is taken for that unit, subtract 1 from that test. While this unit is within 6 inches of 1 or more friendly Adeptus Mechanicus battle line units, subtract 2 from that test instead. That definitely seems like a pretty big nerf from what it was with the 9th edition. As in 9th edition, I remember that ability being much stronger with a much more interesting ability. However, it seems to have kind of gone back to what it used to be within, I believe, 8th edition, though I might be misremembering that a little bit with the Forge World ability of Metallica, so don't quote me on that specifically. But that being said, I do think the Sicarians are still perfectly fine at 16 points, and you can still pretty much run them within an army, as they can be kind of a bit of a nuisance to your opponents. But let's take a look at what the Sicarian Rust Stalkers are doing, as maybe they'll once again edge out the Infiltrators within the 10th edition rule set, as they did within 9th edition, and even, I believe, the end of 8th edition. Now coming to Sicarian Rust Stalkers, they seem to have a very similar profile to the Infiltrators, which is to be expected as they build out of the same kit. Their movement speed is 8 inches, a toughness of 4, a 4+ normal save, and a 5+ invulnerable save with 2 wounds. They do have the stealth keyword, which does make them a little bit more durable, and they have Doctrina Imperatives, which is both a defensive and offensive ability depending on which Doctrina you're in, as I mentioned plenty of times, and I'm sure you're sick of hearing me say that. And for a unit of 5 of them, they'll run you 75 points, but for a unit of 10 of them, it'll run you 150 points, meaning that they're less expensive than the Sicarian Infiltrators by 1 point per model, coming in at 15 points. Their weapons are pretty much what they used to be within 9th edition, being the Transonic Blades or the Transonic Razor with a Quarter Claw. The Transonic Blades still have a very similar profile to what they did before, being essentially a power weapon with 4 attacks per model, with a strength of 4, 1 armor penetration, and 1 damage, at a 4+ weapon skill. They do have the Devastating Wounds ability, which replaces their damage with mortal wounds, given that they score a critical hit. They also have the Precision ability, which says each time an attack made with such a weapon successfully wounds an attached unit, if a character model in that unit is visible to the attacking model's player can choose to have that attack allocated to the character model instead of following the normal attack sequence. This is actually really interesting because now in 10th edition, characters can lead units, and if you get the jump on an enemy unit that has a character in it, you can potentially take out that character before you take out any of the other models, giving you a huge advantage if you can successfully deal the damage to that model. However, with only one armor penetration baseline, that can be a little bit difficult, though if you get lucky and get a few devastating wounds, considering the number of attacks you get per Ruststalker, you can actually allocate quite a decent amount of mortal wounds against an enemy model, which can be rather painful to your opponent. Now what about the Transonic Razor and the Cord Claw? Those are now more of the anti-infantry weapon. Considering that they have an anti-infantry profile of 3+, they still retain that precision ability, though they only gain 3 attacks per Ruststalker instead of 4. They also have a strength of 4, 2 armor penetration, and 1 damage. This does make it a little weird because all of a sudden you kind of want the Transonic Razor and the Cord Claw, whereas in 9th edition you wanted those Transonic Blades, as the profiles were a little bit reversed, and the Cord Claw gave you an extra attack but wasn't particularly impressive. So this is kind of strange, and this is probably pretty annoying to anyone who built their Ruststalkers in 9th edition and now has to swap them over or hasn't magnetized them because they're a smaller model, and it's a big pain in the butt to magnetize such small models. That being said, do keep in mind that the Transonic Blades do have those devastating wounds, which is kind of nice, as that can really make up for some of the additional armor penetration of the Razor and the Cord Claw. In addition to that, you do gain that additional attack, so you still might want to stick with the Transonic Blades, even though that the additional point of armor penetration might be a little tempting. But at the end of the day, I do think the Transonic Blades will be your go-to in most situations, so that's something good to keep in mind, and at least it means you're not completely out of luck if you build your Ruststalkers that way. And I guess the more I think about it, the more I like the Transonic Blades, so that's what I would pretty much stick with. And the nice thing is, the Alpha still has the Transonic Blades and the Cord Claw, which gives him that anti-infantry 3+, and the devastating wounds, as well as precision attacks and 4 attacks total, which means that Alpha is going to be scoring quite a decent amount of mortal wounds, considering that he has to roll a 3+ on the wound roll to score a critical hit due to that anti-infantry ability, unless they specify somewhere that only belongs to a Cord Claw, in which case that's significantly worse. So that being said, I'd probably run a unit of 10 of these with those Transonic Blades and kind of try to take out characters in certain units if I can, but if I can't, they're still perfectly fine melee blenders, and they can do quite a decent amount of work, so they're still a very impressive unit type. Now, they do have one other special ability, as did the Infiltrators, that is Optimized Gate, and Optimized Gate says add 1 to the advance and charge rolls made for this unit. While this unit is within 6 inches of one or more friendly Adeptus Mechanicus battle line units, add 2 to the advance and charge rolls made for this unit instead. Very powerful and can be very effective in getting into position and making your charge roll successfully. So that being said, I do think the Ruststalkers once again overshadow the Infiltrators, and you can really be very effective with a unit of 10 of these on the tabletop, but you can easily go up to 3 units of 10 and be perfectly happy with how they perform, as they're still rather inexpensive units and they're still particularly good in terms of what they can do on the battlefield. Anyway, with that being said, I think this is a good place to kind of cap out this video. We'll continue looking on at the different choices, which is pretty much the Rangers Vanguard and the different character units as well as the Scorpius tanks within the next video, and then after that we'll take a look at the Common Patrol rules that were put out just recently. Though in any case, do remember, if you've enjoyed the content, do subscribe and give the video if you liked it, dislike it if you dislike it, and don't be afraid to share this video with people you think might enjoy the video or benefit from whatever I spoke about here. So thank you for watching and have a great day.